This is Paul. What follows here is a compilation of three randos. The first one is from Glenn Sunshine, who I just spoke with this week. And part of his story reminded me of TJ Sartori's story, Michael Sartori's father, who I talked to a few weeks ago. And then part of that also made me think about Annie Crawford's story. Over on the Vanderclips channel, I'm just playing old Randos video. I don't know how many people are watching him or not watching him. It doesn't really matter. Doesn't cost me anything really to run that thing. I sort of figured out how to do it technically for nothing. So if you're interested in old Randos conversation, I'll put the link below. I'm going to be traveling for a little bit again. This will be my last trip for a while, so I don't know what kind of videos will come out on the channel. I will release the three randos or the three conversations that I did this week, but I really liked especially how Glenn and TJ Sartori's stories connected, because there was a period, so I think both these gentlemen, Glenn's about 5 years older than I am. TJ's a little bit older than I am too. But there's a period in the 70s when nominal Catholics just often sort of became evangelical Christians. And both of their stories, both Glenn and TJ, have that same element in their families. And so I thought, I noticed that when I was doing Glenn's conversation. And so then I thought, I want to go back and listen to these. And then it made me think of Annie's conversation, and Annie with her experience of the demonic that sort of scared her, and then her trek up to Denali, and then her finding a man in Nepal. And there's so much beauty in so many of these stories, and so many more stories that I'll never get a chance to hear. But I thought I would just make a video and just set the elements of those three stories side by side. So and they're all conversion stories, which I've always loved. Conversion stories. I love to hear. I just love to hear people's stories, but especially stories of rescue where a whole new life begins to grow, and sometimes it happens when they're young, and sometimes actually maybe I'll throw in the one that I just did from Lionheart. So maybe I'll throw the four in. So then there'll be two teasers. I'll put the Lionheart maybe after Annie's. So I hope you enjoy it. It's a video that I know probably isn't going to get a lot of views, but I love these stories, and I hope you enjoy them.
But
Did you go to church as a kid?
yeah, well, okay, yeah. I grew up in a, well, to call them nominally Catholic would be an exaggeration. My parents dropped me off at church on Sunday morning, and I'd go to church and then go to the CCD classes. And then my parents would pick me up, or when I got a little older, I'd bike home if the weather was decent.
Okay. Did all of your siblings go to church too, or?
At least through confirmation.
Okay.
And after a confirmation, it was optional. Um, but when I talk about my parents being nominal, or actually that's an exaggeration, they didn't even go to church on Christmas or Easter. Okay,
Okay.
so
But why did they send the kids to church? Just free babysitting, or they thought it was
well,
important for kids?
they thought it was. I think they thought it was important for kids, and although they were not particularly practicing, uh, I think they thought it was important at that point, at least, for us to be Catholic.
Ah.
Now, interesting sidelight there. My dad, my grandfather on my father's side immigrated to the country from what was then Austria, is now Poland. His given name was Chaim Sonnenschein,
Wow.
like Chaim, to life, l'chaim. He
Right.
was Jewish.
Right.
He was
Right.
Jewish. And
Yep.
Sonnenschein is actually particularly in Austria, but in any German or Eastern European country, Central Eastern European country, they'll recognize it as a Jewish name. So when he immigrated, he translated his name from Chaim Sonnenschein to Harry Sunshine. Uh,
That's a pretty good. That's a kind of a
so
fun translation.
yeah, so Chaim actually comes to English as Harry quite often because the ch is close to an H.
Right.
But he died in a train accident when my dad was 5.
Oh my.
And so my dad grew up in a Jewish orphanage in New York. And
Wow.
when he graduated from high school, he absolutely hated the place.
Hmm.
And when he graduated from high school, he didn't want to have anything to do with it at all. So he met my mom on a Circle Line, and if you're from New York, you'll
Yep.
know what that is.
Yep.
And one thing led to another, and he proposed. And my grandfather, who had also immigrated from Central Europe, said, "You are not going to marry my daughter unless you become Catholic." So
Okay.
he said, "Well, fine by me." So
Hmm.
he became a Catholic. And as a matter of fact, my born Jewish father taught me the Hail Mary when I was growing
Wow.
up.
But you went to public school, not parochial school.
Yeah, I went to public school. Yeah, all my
Okay.
brothers did.
Okay.
Now, by the way, speaking of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, that's my mother's side of the family.
Ah.
My grandfather was from Moravia, modern day Czechia. My grandmother was the daughter of a Slovak nationalist by the name of Anton Bielik, who was married to a Hungarian noble at a time
Wow.
when the Hungarians were busy trying to destroy Slovak culture through Magyarization.
Okay.
By all accounts in the family, it was sort of a Romeo and Juliet situation. But my great grandfather, Anton, was a novelist and newspaper editor, friend of Leo Tolstoy. Um, part of a sort of pan-Slavic movement.
Okay.
But my great grandmother, her cousin, was a guy by the name of Baros Gabor, who was well, when I was in Hungary, I mentioned to them that I had a relative that I guess was kind of well known, and they asked me who he was, and I told them, and they said, "You're related to him?" That would be like me telling you I was related to George Washington. And everybody told me different stories about the different things this guy had done. No two
Wow.
stories overlap because he was involved in so many different things. Outside of the Keleti, the East train station in Budapest, there's a square named after him with a big statue of him in it.
Wow.
So, so when I had to pinch hit for somebody teaching World War One,
Uh-huh.
I ended up using my family history as sort of the setup for how World War One happened.
Wow.
Um,
You, you see, you're fortunate because the genealogist did a study of, because one of the things he did is connect you to, let's say, your most famous, closest relative. You got the George Washington of civilization. I got the Marx Brothers. So
yeah.
there we go.
Well, yeah. The uh, some of the cousins. Well, when Anton was exiled out of the Austro-Hungarian Empire and he came over here, some of his kids were actually involved in setting up the Trianon Treaty, which was the equivalent of the Versailles Treaty. It predated it to break up the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So
Wow.
they were actually involved. One of them is a signatory of the Czechoslovak Declaration of Independence. And it turns out that all the various states in Eastern Europe, part of what determined their borders is they wanted to give each of them a nucleus of a rail system. The rail system for the Austro-Hungarian Empire was designed by Baros Gabor, the cousin. So, like I say, I'm just sort of my family history is just sort of all over that area.
So were these stories, especially on now, because stories that get passed down are often they have a valence. I mean, people either brag about them or sometimes they try to forget them, or a few generations later, they'll laugh about the shame or the embarrassment. So, were these stories sort of passed down with a degree of pride?
We actually had to hunt most of these down.
Hmm.
Um, they're really, I mean, even my parents didn't really know much. They knew a little bit, but not much about the history before that, at least not that they passed on to us. A lot of this ended up being stuff that my brothers and I sort of researched on our own.
Wow.
When
Why do you think it was sort of forgotten or just neglected or just uninteresting when they got to America? Was it stuff they wanted to leave behind or?
Well, my grandparents on my mother's side, my grandparents ran a deli in Astoria. I mean, after a number of other things, the Depression and things like that
Yeah.
really sort of knocked the stuffing out of them in a lot of ways. But they did not even teach their native languages to their children
Wow.
because they said, we are in America, we are going to speak English. And besides, in practical terms, if you're running a deli and you're speaking Slovak or Czech or Hungarian or something, nobody's going to come in.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
English and English only.
Yeah.
And so what that ended up doing is, in a lot of ways, it cut off the family from the older traditions. So, for example, um, the one thing I know about is we have certain foods that we have sort of passed down for Christmas at Christmas time. And there are not many of them. We got a lot of cookie recipes from Central Europe, which translation ground nuts and butter. Okay, but the foods that were eaten actually all of them had some sort of symbolic meaning, but it's completely lost. We don't know what they are. My mother knew that there was some kind of symbolism here, but she had no idea what that was. It was
Wow.
literally erased at that level.
Were you still going to church after confirmation? Were you going to church because you wanted to?
Ah, yeah. Now here's where things get interesting.
Okay.
Um, when I was 13 years old, on my mother's birthday, we went to my second oldest brother's house, which was in the next town over in Cedar Grove, who was he was a chiropractor. And when we got there, he started talking to my mom about the Bible. He had run into a group of evangelicals. He was born again at this point, and changed all of his religious outlook.
Yeah.
He and a number of other members of my family or people in our house had actually been experimenting with the occult and things like that. But he ran into this Bible study and he got converted, and he was busy trying to evangelize my mom. Now, at that point in my life, I was one of those people who was looking for something. I
Hmm.
was trying to read up on the occult, but there wasn't a lot available in the Verona Public Library. Thank you very much. Um, so, I mean, I was spiritually interested, and I was
Yep.
more engaged than my more recent brothers had been in this, the next two up. So Barry was talking to my mom about the Bible. I thought, gee, that sounds interesting. So I sat in to listen. My mom walked away. Barry still had an audience, so he kept talking. If you know Barry, you'll understand. And he showed me what the Bible had to say, working in Romans, working in Acts, working in other things. And at that point, I just sort of said, all right, well, this is what the Bible says. Catholic Church taught me to believe the Bible, so this is the truth. And at that point, I shifted toward what we call evangelicalism. Curiously enough, the date was September 19th, 1971, 40 years to the day after Addison's Walk.
Which you probably had no knowledge of when you were 13.
Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, I didn't know the date until this year, I don't think.
So, as a 13-year, it's interesting because I just recently had a conversation with Michael Sartori's father, who also grew up Catholic, and my sense is there were a lot of Catholic to evangelical conversions in those years.
I think so.
Um, and so did you then start going to church with your brother? Or how did you pick then a church to go
I
to?
I finished up the year in CCD. I think. I'm pretty sure I did. But then I started going with my brother. Then he moved to Tennessee, and that was a
Oh.
rather long commute. But by this point, two of my other brothers had come to faith from a totally different direction.
Oh.
And they were attending a Christian and Missionary Alliance church in the next town over in Caldwell. So I started going with them.
Okay.
And, so I've been in a sort of independent Baptist church, Hawthorne Gospel.
Oh,
Uh,
really?
yep, that was where Barry was going.
Oh my word. That's fascinating.
Yeah, under Pastor Bronlin. I still remember the
Okay.
first sermon he preached, in fact, that I heard. Um,
Wow.
then I was in the CMA church for the rest of my high school career. Um, by this point, by the way, my parents started noticing a pattern. Four out of the five of us had become evangelicals, so they started attending uh, the CMA and eventually Presbyterian church.
Wow.
Um, my oldest brother was the one holdout. We prayed for him for over 50 years, and he finally came to Christ a few years ago.
Wow. Wow.
So, yeah, it was quite a long process with him. But in any event, when I got out of high school, we went to Michigan State, and some of the guys in the dorm, we had actually kind of an unusual situation where we had our own independent dorm fellowship. It was
Oh.
sort of like an intervarsity thing,
Uh-huh.
except it was just people in the dorm, and we didn't have any supervisors, just sort of what we did.
Okay.
And some of them were going to University Reformed Church in East Lansing, where Kevin
Okay.
DeYoung would eventually be pastor.
Yep.
Although at this point it was a guy named Tom Stark. And so I started attending University Reformed.
Okay.
And at that, while, and in my freshman year, some of the other guys in the dorm were in Work of Christ, which is a charismatic prayer group.
Okay.
So I was attending the charismatic prayer group and going to University Reformed Church. I decided that the charismatic community really wasn't for me. There were a number of things about it that just did not fit.
Hmm.
And so I really sunk into URC. I worked with the music ministry there. I attended morning and evening services. And at that point, I really became pretty thoroughly reformed in my outlook.
Okay. Um, so where did you meet your wife?
Um, it was in our dormitory. I was in, well, I'd been there a year. Uh, I'd gone back for my sophomore year, and one of the women that I knew was back too, and I was writing a note on her door. I was looking for Betsy. I was
Yeah.
writing a note on her door, and Lynn walked up, and Lynn, you know, uh, introduced herself. I introduced myself, and she folded into the dorm fellowship,
Uh-huh.
pretty much right away. I introduced her to everybody that night at dinner. And then, well, I was not initially dating Lynn, or, I considered her a friend. We'd
Yeah.
gotten to know each other.
Yeah.
But the thing that was really critical is at the time I was clinically depressed.
Oh.
I was, I mean, and it was a pretty serious depression. Um, I'd actually, I wasn't suicidal, but I had taken dispassionate looks at suicide. Okay.
Now, had this been a pattern for you, or was this just sort of
S-
in something emerged?
Started probably the earliest bits of it. I think I can date back to my senior year in high school,
Okay.
and it got worse during my freshman year. My sophomore year, it hit really hard.
Hmm.
And Lynn is sort of the opposite of that. Lynn is by nature a happy, joyful person. And I she says I thought she was an airhead. That's not really true. Uh, I did think, though, that she didn't really take things seriously, particularly.
Hmm.
Not that she was dumb or anything, but she
Yeah.
just really didn't take things seriously.
Yeah.
Then one day I walked in and I could tell she was unhappy about something. So I said, what's going on? She said, well,
Yeah.
she got a letter from her friend, and she explained the situation to me. And at that point, something clicked in my head, and I realized that I had been reading Lynn completely wrong, and that I
Oh.
what I was seeing in her wasn't just sort of this, not taking things seriously. What I was seeing in her was joy.
Mm.
something that transcended circumstances. And this is something I had never seen before. I'd never run into
Mm.
this.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm
Mm-hmm.
afraid at that point I was done. You know, um, but at that point, Lynn had something I just couldn't I couldn't look away from it.
Mm. Mm.
And no, Lynn, for her part, will tell you she thought I just didn't know how to have fun. Um, and she actually considered it part of her mission to teach me how to have fun. And this was at a point when she didn't know that I was really interested in her. And by the summer, I
Mm.
knew that I was going to marry her, and she didn't know I was interested in her.
Oh.
Um, but uh, that next fall, we started dating.
Yeah. Yeah.
We were actually engaged, although nobody knew it, before the end of that academic year.
Okay.
Um, and then I went off in the summer to Norman, Oklahoma to work with Summer Institute of Linguistics, get training with them. That's the scientific arm of Wycliffe Bible Translators.
Yeah.
I was a linguistics major. Um, and when we got back, I told my parents, she told her parents, and yeah, then we started planning the wedding.
Wonderful. What a great story. I love when people have their their courtship stories in their randos, especially when you're still married. After if it's wife one or wife two, the people tend to sort of push them away.
Yeah, it's been 45 years this year.
Wow, congratulations. Italian Catholics, did you go to church faithfully?
Oh yes, and interestingly, it was an Italian parish. It was not a geographical limitation. It was an
Oh.
ethnic uh, I don't know what you would call it, church. But actually, when I was growing up, the priest, the senior priest, was Father Sartori, which was a little confusing to some of my friends.
Well, if the priest is going to have a kid on the side, they're not going to give him his name.
Yeah, yeah. But Sartori is actually a very common name in Italy. Its translation is tailor. So as
Oh,
many tailors as you find in our phone book, that would be how many Sartoris there would be in an Italian phone book.
all right.
So,
And well, what was your religious life like? Did you observe, I mean, Fridays, the fast
yep,
on
no meat.
Fridays and
Yeah, although my mother's mother, who was a bit more notorious than my paternal grandmother, uh, she ate fish on Thursday because it was fresher. Let me tell you, my grandmother on my mother's side was, well, a little crooked. That's the best way I can describe it. She was considerably above the law in many instances, and my mother wrote a little book about it. It's quite amusing. She had passed before I was born. Um, we went to church every Sunday. We could walk to church. In fact, we did most times. Most of the times I went with my mom and dad. My brothers were altar boys. And occasionally I would they went to, like, I don't know, the 9 o'clock mass. Occasionally I would go with my aunt and my grandmother, which would have been the 10:15 mass or 11. And it was a high mass and it was a Eucharistic mass. It's hard to realize this has been over 52 years
yeah.
since I practiced Catholicism. So
Mhm.
I'm a little rusty. Anyway, I would go with my aunt and my grandmother, and I liked doing that. Not so much because the mass was longer by any means, but we stopped at a bakery shop between our house and there, and I got a chocolate covered donut.
Ah,
So that was well worth the adventure, to say the least.
absolutely.
I really enjoyed it. Of course, early as a child, the mass was in Latin. And, for example, my mother had a Latin English missal. I actually acquired, and I use that term rather loosely. I would say I probably stole it, but in any case, a little missal that was English and Latin. Anyway, so by the time I got to high school, and of course my brothers are 6 and 9 years older than me, and it's the '60s, and we had, well, it was okay to do things that were illegal if you didn't get caught, basically, and okay, and that was, kind of my mother's family's kind of background. I had a couple of uncles who were definitely into things, jukeboxes, cigarette machines, and pinball machines, and a few other notoriously questionable obtainers of goods, shall we say, and which sold for a reasonable price as opposed to what they were actually worth. Anyway, and I would say my description at some point along the line was pagan. I really didn't attend mass anymore. I got involved in the drug culture pretty heavily. My body is very susceptible to the effects of drugs. I could hallucinate on marijuana, and that's the old marijuana, not the new stuff. But was very deeply into that and alcohol. I think I started alcohol freshman, sophomore year. We used to steal a bit from each of our parents, and a group of us, and Friday nights we'd drink. And in fact, at one point, two of our buddies decided they'd make dandelion wine and fermented it under their bed, and we drank that on a couple of nights, which was also very interesting because of a particular incident. So we'd walk around in this north side of the town. I lived on the south side of town, the other side of the tracks, and pretty affluent, a lot of Jewish people. One of my best buddies was Jewish. And we used to walk around those neighborhoods. And of course, there was a playground nearby, and we'd stop there. And this one particular time we stopped there, there was this cute little girl. She was a freshman, I knew. I didn't really know her, but I knew she was a freshman. And I offered her a drink. And she said, "No, thanks. I have Jesus." And then my buddies called me away, and I was willing to, well, I kind of know who Jesus is, sort of thing. And that would be great. Anyway, so continued on with that subculture life, drinking predominantly. I got thrown out of school because of college, because I had unlimited cuts, and I did. And so I passed, I think, art history, and I think one other class. It was like I had a C and a D. My cum was less than 1. And the dean politely asked me in writing to leave. And I had to be out of school for at least a semester. It ended up being a year. I worked for Sears for 9 years, high school through college, and after marriage even. And during that time, one guy who was at work, the guy was an albino. I mean, he very distinctly, you could see him, long hair, and light skin and the whole deal. Anyway, this kid asked me for a ride home, and I at that time was not a particularly nice person. I was not a nice person at all, but I found myself saying yes to him. So I had a 69 maybe, no, not even that, 66 Rambler Ambassador convertible, and for my high school graduation, instead of an AM/FM radio, which was one of the gifts like my brothers would have gotten, and a watch, I got an 8-track cassette player for my car. And he gets in the car, and he's going through the tapes. And one of the tapes I had, which a friend had given me, was Jesus Christ Superstar. Huh. And he says, "Boy, I'm really into that." And he plugs that in, and it's a pretty good soundtrack. Anyway, the theology, a little questionable, but not bad. So anyway, he starts talking to me, and he's talking about that he met these people, and he started going to these meetings with them, and that he didn't have faith. And he said he didn't know who Jesus was. Now, the minute he said that to me, that I thought particularly strange. The first thought was, is he Jewish? Muslim? You know, everybody knows who Jesus is. He's the Son of God. Anyway, so the conversation was really good. And I took him to our house. And my mom served us tea and raisin bread toast. And he shared the gospel with us and how he came to faith in Christ. That didn't quite do it for me, but it was intriguing, and I was very impressed with that.
What impressed you about it?
I think the sincerity of it and the excitement that he had for his relationship. See, now I'm looking back at it.
Yeah.
You know, at the time, I would say it stirred my heart. That would be the best way I could.
Because you didn't really describe yourself so much as a seeker. It sounds like you were having fun. You're sort of doing what everybody's doing.
Yeah.
And you've got a cool car. You've got an 8-track player in it. I mean, I'm maybe a little younger than you, but I remember the 60s and the 70s. And if in the early 70s you got an 8-track player in your car, you're doing all right.
Right.
And he's an albino, so that's that'll certainly stand out. But what did your mother make of it?
My mother was a fantastic person. We were notorious for what we later termed orphelines, you know, like people who didn't have a place to go for Christmas or Thanksgiving or anything like that. And all of my brothers and my friends on various occasions slept on our couch because they had to, problems at home or whatever. And she had a very accepting person. Later in life, she became a pink lady at the hospital for, I don't know, 20, 30 years almost. And it was just like, she could get information out of anybody at a drop of the hat. People just, talk to her and she listened. And so as a pink lady, she was the abuela to a whole bunch of the Candy Striper girls and what have you. And in fact, she even took a Spanish course so she could understand what they were saying. Yeah. So, like I said, my mother was quite the character. So, in the course of these events,
so what did this testimony from this albino? What was involved in that for him? He's just telling this story about how he found Jesus and started going to church and how this changed his life.
Yes.
Okay.
And the fact of going to church, that was kind of a normal thing for most of America and most of my neighborhood and friends and family. And that was pretty much it. He got fired or quit. I can't remember which. I think it was he got fired. And that was, I only, I see him at work for a little bit, but after that testimony, I didn't see him hardly at all. And then, like I said, he was gone. Huh. So that was fine.
Maybe he's an angel.
Now, somewhere in the midst of that, I decided that I would like to I had a lot of anger, incredible anger.
Okay.
In fact, most people were afraid of me in the depths of my anger. It was murderous.
What were you angry about?
Life.
Okay.
That was. I wasn't happy. That's part of it. Life was not going the way I wanted it to go.
Okay.
And somewhere in the midst of that, I got mugged. So my nose, Italian nose as it is, got altered a little bit with 5 stitches across the top of my nose. The guys, they were high. They had kind of run me off the road. I had my window down. They ran out of the car, ran over to my car, grabbed me by the hair, pulled me out, a couple of chunks of hair, and started wailing on me. And of course, they split open my nose. They had cut somebody else off, and those guys had turned around and scared them off. So I wasn't very far from home, so I went home and I went to the sink to wash. I thought I had a bloody nose, basically. And when I felt up, and it was, like a gash all the way across my nose, my father's in bed with my mother. We lived on the second floor, and I said, I think I have to go to the hospital. And sure enough, I did. And 5 stitches later, that was all set. It was really interesting. When I got high, sometimes it was a bummer, really bad. And I thought I'd lose it. So I started reading my missal. Every missal has a gospel portion and an epistle portion, and sometimes even a psalm. And so I started reading that, and that brought me back to reality from the highs that I was in.
Mm.
And somewhere along the line, I figured, gee, I should read the Bible. It's, bestseller and all that kind of thing. An educated person, you should read the Bible. We had a Catholic Bible that I had convinced my mother to let us get at the S&H Green Stamp Redemption Center. How's that for a term? For one book that we had left over. And there, they put how many books it was for whatever it was on display. And I said, can we get this? And she said, sure. So we got it. And I remembered, we got a Bible downstairs in the bookcase. You should get that and start reading that. And of course, the one thing I can tell you from reading, and I read most of the New Testament, got a little bogged down in Corinthians because the printing was a little funky on the sides. I mean, what do you expect for one green stamp book? Anyway, and I really thought, how wonderful it would have been to have lived there in Israel at that time when Jesus walked the face of the earth. Little did I know that I would have a much more intimate relationship later on in life. So that's going on, and I've got the 5 stitches and what have you, and still I got back into college. I went from the place I worked. This is in Natick, Massachusetts. The college was Framingham State. It was a college then; it's university now. And there's got to be 10 or so lights you have to go through. I couldn't find anybody to cover me for the appointment that I had with the dean until this guy walks in from the sales floor out to the shop, which is where I worked as a cashier. He says, I'll cover you. And he wasn't necessarily a particularly nice person either, but he was friendly to me. We weren't at odds by any way. And so he covered me. And I went from where I worked to the college without a single red light. And like I said, that had to be 10 lights at least that I went through. So I'm telling the dean, I'd like to go back to school, after being kicked out with a cumulus and 1. And, he listens to me and what I want to do. And I was a history major. And he says, I'll be right back. And he comes back and he says, I got you signed up for 3 courses. Usually it would be 4-course load. They're each worth 4 credits each. Yeah, it was a little different system, a little more intense.
Yeah.
And he says, I signed you up for 3 courses. He says, I wanted to be an elementary school teacher. He says, you're going to have to stay a history major because they won't let you in the elementary department with your grades. So I stayed in history and went back to school. Okay, so I'm still practicing my ungodly lifestyle. And it was the year of the embargo.
Oh yeah, the oil embargo.
Yep.
Gas lines,
even odd days.
Yeah.
And I had a friend who, this is one of our group, and he worked for Lowe's Theaters, and he used to get passes. And they closed the school shortly after Thanksgiving and wouldn't reopen until the 28th. All the state schools were shut down to save on the oil, because in the Northeast in the winter you got to have an oil heat.
Yeah, the heat. Yep.
So somewhere between Christmas and the 28th of January, he brought us to The Exorcist, front row. I'm praying my contact lenses will fall out, and it was just like it was terrifying.
Hmm.
And what came of it was I ended up, now I had dabbled in a little bit of the occult, and plus you're doing drugs. And let me tell you, that's pharmakia, that's witchcraft. And I was being tormented by a spirit, terribly, terribly terrorized. I couldn't sleep because I'd get woken up and be terrified by this spirit. And I started reading the Bible, and I kind of like the passages in First John. It was talking about children of God, which I really liked. But then it was talking about children of the devil, and I really didn't like those ones because basically the Holy Spirit was convicting me. Anyway, I went down to about 120 pounds, maybe a little less, and I wasn't very heavy to begin with, so it was noticeable. My parents noticed. I mean, I didn't even sleep in my own bed. I slept down on the couch in the den, and I had a childhood friend I hadn't seen in years. I had heard a story. Now, this kid, I used to help get him to school in high school. He's a brilliant kid. And his father had died, and his mother really didn't have any control over him. In fact, I think he's one of the first people to introduce me to drugs. But anyway, a friend of mine, another, Italian from the neighborhood, like him and myself, and he says, yeah, he went back to school, and now he's selling real estate. He went to Harvard. Yeah, he did a CLEP program and got accepted in, and
Wow.
he finished it at Harvard. He was selling real estate. So I met him, and we're old friends. I've known him since like first grade.
Yeah.
And it's one of those kind of friendships that the minute you see him, you pick up from roughly where you left off, and you continue on. And so I'm telling him about this stuff, and I can remember having, interestingly enough, a conversation in a bar room with him. We were sitting at a booth, and I was talking about, I'm reading this book called Corinthians. I haven't figured out whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. He says, oh yeah, that's a good thing. Anyway, so I let him know about what's going on here, and he says, why don't you come talk to the people I work with? And I'm thinking, I'm not going to go to some guy's work, talk to some strangers about my problems. Now, meantime, I had gone to confession with another friend and confessed my sins and whatever. And I told him, after I could remember as many of my sins as I could to confess, I said, I also went to this movie called The Exorcist, and it was about a person being demon possessed. And I'm hoping he's going to say to me, yeah, don't worry about that. That's not real. Nothing to worry about. But he says, well, that's in the Bible. That was not the answer I wanted to hear. And it was, again, kind of convicting, because really what struck me was this little girl who became possessed in the movie hadn't done anything wrong, and yet she's being possessed and tormented by a wicked devil. And here I am. I'm practically a criminal. I'd been arrested for drugs. My mother got our old den chief from Cub Scouts to be my lawyer, and I got off on probation for 6 months, and then it was dismissed. Anyway, and back then, if you were in the presence of marijuana, they could arrest you, number one. Number two, it was a felony. It was considered a controlled substance. The laws had not changed as lenient as they are these days, or even legal. And it just, kind of put another nail in my heart about I'm in tough shape here. So I don't want to go to this guy and his work, and I waited about 2 weeks, and things are not getting better. They're getting worse. And I finally says, okay, I'll come with you, meet your friends. Well, guess what the name of the real estate company is? Christian Realty. The owner's a Catholic charismatic. He got saved family-wise from the Duquesne outpouring amongst Catholics. It was a very interesting historical kind of phenomenon that occurred. And so he was there, what would I call him? An ex-alcoholic, basically, and Protestant background, evangelical Protestant background. And he had gotten saved. Actually, he'd gotten healed and saved at a Catherine Coleman
Yeah.
concert, whatever you call those things, show, which is what it was pretty much. He was given money and a car, which you don't give to an alcoholic, and his nephew to go and see if he could get him healed. Well, his nephew didn't get healed, but he got saved. And so he becomes Christian. He marries this divorced lady who was an old line Pentecostal. Now, he shared the gospel with me. Now, we had well established the Bible. What do you think about the Bible? Well, it's holy. I had no problem with that. I believed it was holy too. And he shared with me, and apparently I got saved, but I was still in some severe bondage, really severe bondage. His wife, who usually cleaned houses, got locked out of her last job, and she ended up at the thing. And he goes out and he talks to her, says, this kid's saved, but he needs deliverance. And so she comes in and she starts sharing again about the gospel and what Jesus has done. And it boils down to, she asked me these questions. Do you believe that Jesus died for your sins, was born of the Virgin Mary, died for your sins, and was raised again from the dead? And I said, yes. And the minute I said that, it was like, to be honest with you, I heard, well, first of all, there was the struggle. The lady walks in, the devil is saying to me, you don't want to listen to her. She's ugly. Don't listen to what she has to say. Okay, so there's a spiritual battle going on inside my head.
Yeah.
But I hear the voice of God. Didn't know it was God at the time, but he says, you need to listen to her. And I did. And the light breaks, and I hear God say, oh, ye of little faith. It was just like, wow, this is fantastic. I can remember I used to hollow out old books to hide things in. And one of the books I was going to use, I asked my brother, is this any good? Can I use this book? He says, oh, yeah, it's just Protestant propaganda. Now, my brother, the altar boy, he went to Boston College. He studied under the Jesuits. In fact, Father Drinan, who became a congressman before the Pope said, you can't be a congressman, that was one of his teachers. And my brother was brilliant. Anyway, so I know that all of the word of God is true. And I am, the light has dawned. And I go home and I'm thinking, I'm going to read my Bible. I mean, my mother could see, something happened here, But I go home, I sit in the living room in my favorite chair, start to read the Bible, and the whole feeling of being oppressed, being afraid, terrorized comes back upon me. And it's like, oh, God, I've lost him. So I call up my Italian friend who brought me to the office and said, you got to help me. So we're upstairs on the third floor. I got an extension phone up there. And we call the lady. And we go through scriptures. And I'm not feeling that great. But, she's very clearly announced to me and shown me in the scriptures, God says, I'll never leave you nor forsake you. And so that night, I actually slept in faith. And that was the start. And so I don't know exactly what day it is. So I count it as January 28th because that was the day we had to go back to school.
What year?
1973, 74. So I say 52 years ago.
Okay.
Right? Working on 53.
So did you start going to church then? And if so, what church?
The Catholic Church.
The Catholic Church.
Down the street. Listen, later on in life, I brought my mother to the Lord. If they had put a Baptist church between the Catholic Church and my mother's house, she would have gone. But they didn't, so she kept going to the Catholic Church, but she read her Bible. Now, I want to also say my mother was a pretty decent prayer warrior as long as I knew her. I mean, I knew she prayed for me. She had good reason to pray for me. So, yeah, that's what I went through. So I have this sort of... I'm just going to say it this way. The Lord spoke to me, and I'm driving home from work, and I go by this little tiny Pentecostal church, little tiny white church. I lived in my town for 20 years. I never remember this church. I just happened to take a little different route home from work to avoid traffic, and here's the church. And the Lord says to me, "Bring your cousin. He's going to get saved." And I'm looking at the times. Wednesday night. Okay, so I bring my cousin on Wednesday night. He gets saved, and he's a first cousin. We're close. He's about a year younger than me. We've known each other all our lives. Anyway, so we get there, like I said, he gets saved, and they're telling me, usually there's a whole bunch of kids from the college you go to go here, but they weren't there that night. So I find out there's other Christians at the college. They find out there's a new believer at the college. And I'm going to say that was probably that was February. So they knew I was there. I knew they were there, but getting together, that served a problem. I found out that one of the Christians was a history major, which I was, and I asked another friend, "Do you know this guy?" He says, "Yeah, I know this guy." He says, "Well, if he's ever nearby us, can you point him out to me?" So he points him out to me this one time, and I follow him in under the building. That's where they had pottery wheels for the art students, and he was going to visit this Christian friend of his that was making pots down in the bottom of the building. And I introduced myself. I said, "I'm TJ Sartori. I'm a new creature in Christ. All that's old has passed away, and behold, all is made new." And they knew, about me. And of course, I knew about them. And that was the start of it. And so, we talked a lot, and they were going to have a meeting. So it's the end of March, actually, by the time I finally get to find them. And so there's a meeting this coming up Wednesday night, and it's April Fool's. And so I go to the thing, and this girl greets me, and she says, "Hi, my name is Sarah. You must be JT." Now, I didn't flinch at that, but, I'm TJ, I'm not JT. But
Right,
anyway,
right.
But it was a memorable night because she still remembers it. And she's the girl that I ended up marrying.
Wow.
That summer, and so I ended up enrolling in University of Oregon because I'm like, I'm torn, right? There's this, I'm being pulled into a place where I at least am having fun and having relationships, and my emotional needs appear to be tended to. And then I've got my achiever side and terror of poverty. and so I end up enrolling in the Honors College at University of Oregon because that's kind of the highest level I can achieve at this chaotic stage in my life. And then my boyfriend moves down there to Eugene. He's going to go to community college, and, he's got some friends there. So we've got a little very unhealthy friend group in Eugene, and I'm going to school. And I did a summer abroad trip, but somehow I finagled this boyfriend into going with me. And that was we just fought the whole time. Because I think there's something in me that was like, I can't give into this whole lifestyle. I know it's meeting an emotional need, but I know better. I don't actually want this. And like the low point of my life as I moved in with his friends, it was a crack dealer and her lesbian or bisexual girlfriend, and I lived with them. And what I remember is like when my parents moved me in, they were just like horrified because I'm moving into this house, not in a safe or nice part of Eugene. It looks like it's full of squalor. And like just one example is I remember the only thing that there ever was in the fridge to eat was they would make these parfaits of like mayonnaise and hot dogs and mustard. For me, this is like, what am I doing how did I get here? Like, how did I get to living with a crack dealer and and her lesbian girlfriend eating mayonnaise and hot dog parfaits, Paul? Like, how did this happen?
We've never had the hot dog mayonnaise parfait on Randos, but we've got a lot of similar stories. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
never a hot dog mayonnaise mustard parfait. That is new. It sounds sort of uniquely American too. I can't imagine that arising anywhere else in the world but America.
Yeah. Yes, I have this real horror of mayonnaise. So I think it really imaginatively stuck in my soul.
I can imagine.
Yeah. So we were on this trip in Europe, right? We just have a huge fight. We're fighting all the time because this isn't what I want,
Right.
really, right?
Right.
And I'm trying to figure it out. So I remember being on a train in Italy. This is back when you'd get the Eurail pass.
Yeah.
And how we traveled the continent was we would just sleep on a train at night and end up in a new city during the day. And we just did that.
Yep.
So I remember one time we had a fight and I divided our packs. I was like, putting my stuff in my pack and your stuff in your pack. And when that train stopped, I was going to get off and never see this guy again. And then I realized I am a 20-year-old woman alone in Europe, and that's not a good idea.
Yep.
And so I stayed with him, finished our trip, but as soon as I got home, broke up with him, and I was like, I have to figure this out.
Yeah.
And so just spent the rest of college trying to figure it out. But at that point, part of being sucked into that culture was being sucked into New Age. I was reading the Celestine prophecy. I was reading the Bhagavad Gita. I was reading all this, Eastern stuff. And my Christianity had morphed, as it does through all that drug use into a kind of pantheism and all this kind of stuff. And so religiously, that's where I am in a kind of Eastern perennialism. But I have a couple demonic experiences that just scared the crap out of me. God in his mercy and his grace allowed me to have some very demonic experiences where, I'll put it this way. I swear I saw a Nephilim and it scared me so much that I grabbed my friend and just drug him to the car and made him, sorry for the thumbs up, made him drive me to another friend's house. And I swear, in the drug-induced state that took 5 years. Just so that, or another experience I had, if people know Oregon, there's the country fair, the big druggy hippie fair that's out in the country near Eugene. Everyone's high and playing their didgeridoos and wandering around. And so I'm here at the country fair and I heard the voice of Brahman say it was time to release my consciousness into the world soul. And again, I'm terrified. And it was with the droning of this didgeridoo and I felt, it's like I felt my consciousness slipping away from me.
Wow.
And caught it, like what felt like as I caught it at the last second.
Yeah.
Grabbed it back in and then held on to it for another 5 years until the drugs wore off, and again, like I'm the crazy person in the bus trying to get back to my house, like probably just like this, holding on to my consciousness until like I can get home. So a couple experiences like that the Lord used to, as a little spanking of this is not the way of life. You need to repent, turn around and rediscover, right, the paths of life. But that took a little while. What it ended up taking was dating a guy who was Christian enough. Again, I've got this father-shaped hole, right? I don't know how to, now that I've kind of emotionally cracked, right? Because I, all through high school, was pretending I'm fine, I'm independent, I don't need anybody, I don't need anybody, I don't need anybody. Then I crack and I'm like, oh, I have a lot of needs. I need, like Bob Wiley and what about Bob? I need. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I just am dating guys. I'm just using men because I don't know how to fill, I don't know how to deal with my emotional side now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm so sorry, all the guys that I dated when I really wasn't serious, like men use women and women use men.
Yeah. Yeah. They do. It goes both ways.
Both ways, right? Yep. And it goes both ways. And so I apologize to all those people. I was just lost and didn't know what I was doing. But yeah, like dating people in order to just have emotional juice, right? To get through the day. And end up dating a guy who was lost enough to date me, but Christian enough to move me in that direction.
Yep.
And a pivotal moment for me was he was, the Eastern kind of New Age mentality will say that fear is our biggest problem, right? That we are good and
Star Wars.
Yeah, and it's really just fear that prevents us from love.
Yeah.
So, there's no pride or sin to repent. It's very Rousseauian, right? It's just
Yeah.
fear of
Yeah.
social pressures or stigma or
If
whatever.
it was just all me, it would be great.
Yeah.
There's no
So
Augustine knocking on the door and saying, "Are you sure about that?"
yeah, exactly. So I bought into that. I was, philosophical, debating me, arguing that fear is the basis, fear is the basis. But this guy I was dating was like, no, it's not. It's pride. It's pride. And he just, he was hot and good looking and a lot of fun as well. And so, coming from his mouth, the whole pride is the root of evil argument, started to make more sense again. But, God in his mercy, I do think, convinced me of that and reawakened me to the reality of sin, which, as C.S. Lewis says, is the prerequisite for finding the joy of the gospel.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so he reawakened me to that sense of sin, but he ended up breaking up with me. He's like, you have a huge hole in your heart. You're not a whole person. You don't know how to have a relationship because you're not a whole person. Well, I mean, this was just devastating because here he had started to turn me back toward an interest in Orthodox Christianity and a desire to start moving on that path and pulling my life together, but then named this empty space I still had, right? And said, that's not going to work for me. In some ways you're like, in some ways it felt cruel, right?
Yep.
Like, give me a chance to grow. In other ways, I see, ultimately, it's the Lord's severe mercy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And Lamentations 3 has become a really important verse for me. It is good for me to eat dust. This will be my paraphrase, right? To bite the dust when you're young, because then there's still hope, right? And the fact that, again, it just is a severe mercy, but that God allowed me to really completely fall on my face and come to a total end of myself.
Mm-hmm.
Is what allowed me to move into all the blessings that I have now.
Yep.
Right. And yes, okay. So if I let's say I kept dating this guy, could I have grown into more and more maturity? But it would have been a hard road because he was my idol.
Right.
He was my emotional what's the right word to say? Source.
Yep.
And I really do think that the healthiest relationships, ultimately it's about my soul before God.
Yeah.
And I have to come to find God as the source of my strength and my being alone.
And not
right?
a man.
Though he slay me, yet I trust him.
Yep.
Right? That's the foundation upon which a life can be built. Right.
Yep.
So that was really tough season in my life. I think, after he broke up with me, I just remember feeling numb for 3 months. But then slowly, 2 things that the Lord used to stitch me back together and help me make that transference, right? Like, okay, sweet child, you grew up lost. You've tried a few things. Let me help you, come to the fountain, the well that never runs dry. One is I did a trip to Alaska. Just as I need to think, and where do I know to find life? Well, in nature, right? Because at this time I'm not going to church. Once you've been dropping acid on Wheaton campus and running around on shrooms in the redwoods and arguing that fear is the source of all evil, you're not going to church anymore in the 90s, right? So where did I know to go? To nature. So I hopped in my car and I drove, must have been 4 days straight without stopping anywhere, just sleeping in my car when I needed to, smoking clove cigarettes to stay awake, straight to Denali National Park.
Wow. People don't realize how big the West Coast is. And
It was,
because people are like, I want to drive to Alaska. It's like, oh, really? It's a long ways.
if I'm remembering correctly, it's 4 days of like, you know,
Yeah.
13, 14-hour days,
Big days.
big
Yep.
days, right? So, I mean, that was just how, but I wasn't, it wasn't hard and I wasn't tired because that's how much angst I had. You know, again,
Mm.
like Forrest Gump, where, you know, his world falls apart and so he starts running,
Yeah, 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 yeah,
right? And he just
yeah,
kind of, I was
yeah,
running
yeah,
until he just hits the, and he's like, I think I'm done now.
yeah.
I mean, that's me in the car. I was like, I just got, I started driving and I drove and I drove and I drove and I drove and I got to Denali State Park and I got out and I started hiking. I started hiking. I started hiking. And then I slipped and fell on a scree field and almost like fell a couple thousand feet. I'm alone in Denali State Park. Nobody knows where I am.
Oh.
And so that was kind of the last, like, I hear, sorry,
This
I
is the
have,
makings of a bad national park story because this stuff happens. I mean, people think it's a park. Yeah, but it's a certain kind of park where
yeah,
you can get yourself
yeah.
killed.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's moose, there's wolves. It's
Yeah.
late September. There
There's
could
big
be
bears, not the
a
little
freeze.
bears we
There's
have here in
bears.
California.
Yeah. It was just, it shows you how dumb you are when you're young, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Or, oh,
yeah.
apologize for that. I don't know. Usually my um anyway. So yeah. So I kind of slipped and fell, and I think that was again another, you know, one of those awakening moments, you know, where I imagine
Oh, little
God,
master of the universe. This little field of rocks can do you in. You're not such a master of the universe.
yes. And so I just kind of sat down, and again I just thought, you know, I give up. I just give up. Like
Mm,
little, you know, me cannot be independent. I can't make a way for myself. I can't do this.
yeah.
And I just sat down and I thought I would just stop existing. Like I had so much kind of in my soul and imagination thought that I took care of myself. That when I gave up, I would somehow pass out or not exist anymore. Or remember me holding on to my conscience as Brahman is trying to like suck it away, right?
Yeah.
Just such a deep sense that I am the one holding it all together. That when I finally let go, it was like, how am I still here? How am I still here? And it was this visceral experience of like, oh, honey, the Lord carries us. The Lord sustains us. He really is the God, you know, who is there. He really is. And so then I just got my car. Paul, I just drove back home. And I hardly stayed in Alaska at all. I mean, really, it's like my Forrest Gump moment, right? I just gotta turn around, go home now.
Except you didn't have all these people behind you like, he's going to speak. He's going to speak.
Exactly. Yeah. So then I drove home and I, you know, who do I go to? I'll give you a guess. I go to grandma. Grandma.
Yeah.
Hey, what do I do?
Yeah.
So, I miss my grandma.
Yeah.
So she pays for me to go to a Bible school, Ecola Bible School.
Mhm.
Have you ever heard of it?
I think I've heard of it. Yeah.
It's in Cannon Beach, which
Yeah. I've
is
been to
the
Cannon
most
Beach.
beautiful little coast town.
It's great. My wife
It's
and I love Cannon Beach.
yeah. So I grew up. So my mom, as a pianist, we would go there, and she'd be the pianist for one of the, you know, there's the conference center there.
Yeah.
And so I grew up going to the beach. And so that was a like familiar place, positive place. And they have their year-long Bible school where they, you know, one of those, you know, you're right out of college, you're not quite ready to go, or you're right out of high school, you're not quite ready to go to college.
Yep.
Go do a year of, you know, biblical
Yep.
studies and theology while you're at the beach. And so it was kind of me going back to some maturing that I just didn't do. So this, so I was one of the older students, and that was a little humbling, but it's okay. I learned how to like have friends and not based off sexual manipulation, right?
Yeah.
Not competing with women for the male attention.
Yeah.
Like the Lord had stripped me of all of that.
Yeah.
So I was coming in very humble.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
the Lord is the source of my life, and He is my Father, and Christ is my savior and he's the one carrying me and providing. So I could just come in humbly and say, all right, I'm going to learn I'm going to spend time in prayer. I'm going to spend time walking the beach and making actual friends and learning how to do that. So that was a super good year at Ecola Bible School. And they had like Mission Week, right? So at Mission Week, you have all the like pioneers and frontiers and all these missional organizations. Again, this is in the 90s, and maybe it seemed like I don't feel like I see as much of this now, but it was a big deal in the 90s if you're in Christian circles to go do a summer mission trip.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I was out of the country in most of the 90s,
Okay.
but yeah, we had all kinds of summer mission trips down in the Dominican Republic. So
Okay. Yeah. You were on your big mission trip in the
yeah.
which I haven't heard about, and I would like to hear more
Okay.
about that sometime.
Well, you keep going.
Okay. So I'm like, oh yeah, we should do that. Here I am kind of pressing authentically for the first time as an adult into Christianity and what it is to be a faithful Christian and what that looks like. And mission seemed good. So I'll do a mission trip. So I sign up for a mission trip. Now I'm not so sanctified that I have any qualms about going a place that I want to go. So I sign up for a trip to Nepal because, I'm a mountain girl. I'm an outdoor girl. Why not?
You drove to Denali. Why not go to Nepal? I mean, it fits.
That's right. It fits. So I signed up for this trip to Nepal.
Even though someone wants you to, go on.
Well, if you really love the Lord and you were, I don't know, which denomination fits this, Kantian Christian, you would go to the place you least wanted to go because the purity of the duty is what would make it really virtuous, right?
That's right. That's right.
But I've never been a legalist. That's not one of the things I've struggled with. So
So you go to Nepal.
Yep. And so we stop in Florida first for our training, right? So 5 days of training in Florida. And because I guess I'm the oldest, I don't know, I'm picked as the team lead for our team, but 9 to 10 people who are going to go to Nepal. And I'm kind of the one who'll just coordinate and lead our small group breakouts and stuff until we get to Nepal. And then I hand off to the missionary that we're going to meet in Nepal. And so I meet our team, and there's this guy on the team who is from Texas. Now, Oregonians have a lot of prejudice against Texas.
They
right?
do. They do.
They do. So here's this guy from Texas, and he looks like a frat boy. And all I hear him talking about is golf, and that he likes to play golf. And so I'm like, who is this Texas frat boy who just seems to be interested in having a good time? And I don't even know if he's serious about this mission work on this mission trip, right? Because the type A, if I'm going to get an A+ in summer mission work, Paul, right? So I invite our small group to pray. I think, we have our small group, and then the leaders get together. How are your small groups going? And I have the leader team pray. I was like, there's this guy in my group, and I just think he's just here to have a good time. And so we need to pray for him, right? Well, okay, this ends up being my husband. This is who I married.
Sounds like a rom-com.
So we get on this trip, and we just he actually is from Texas, but part of his family goes to Colorado, and so he grew up going to the mountains every summer and mountaineering, and we just ended up hiking together for basically a mission trip to Nepal is you hike Nepal and pray for people in the village, and just kind of learn about the culture and pray for people. And
okay.
So I ended up hiking with him for a month, and we became best friends. And I told him my whole story, and he, didn't think that I was a second-class Christian for having, had struggles, right?
Yeah.
And the thing that really impressed me the most was when we got to India, it was hot as Hades, no AC anywhere, really kind of just an oppressive environment. And so India was just rough, and I was still learning how to trust men and trust myself with men, and that's a bumpy road.
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
sure. Especially on mission trips.
Yes, right. So there's the whole,
There's a lot of mission trips. There's a lot of voltage flowing through wires, and those wires aren't too far away from each other in the brain between the religious emotions and the romantic emotions, and
yes,
it's a lot of
yes,
lot of lot of Christians meet their spouses on mission trips.
yeah. And I don't really know yet how to deal with all that, right? Remember,
Yeah.
I've just had 1 year of learning how to like
Be a person.
be a person,
Yeah.
a stable person
Yeah.
in my relationship with the Lord, and then like the beginnings of relationships with women and healthy people. And so I'm just like 1 year into this.
Yeah.
And so I don't have a lot of wisdom or strength or maturity on how to deal with
Yeah.
that those wires crossing and those closed spaces. And he kept
Yeah.
sitting next to me.
Yeah. Of course.
so, so in my yes elevated maturity, I just started being kind of a nasty, mean person. Instead of talking about it, I would just ignore him or be short tempered or
It is a rom-com.
it kind of is now that you say it.
That's
So
beautiful though. That's beautiful. Keep going.
yeah, hey, rom-coms resonate with people for a reason, right?
They do.
Yeah, they're saying something true. So he's like, hey, can we talk? He takes me out of the hall and he's like, you're being unkind and it sucks. And why are you doing that? And I just thought, no man in my life has ever loved me enough to call out me on anything ever, except for my like horse trainers, Yeah. And I just thought, well, that's someone I can trust. I got like, I was in charge of my life and I drove it into the ground. Right. I know that I need someone who is, again, I was never disciplined at home. It was like, oh, as long as, you seem to be running around happy and getting good grades. And actually I was a mess, right? Nobody loved me enough to discipline me much. I mean, my mom would get pissed and then like slap me and say, I love you, but I don't like you. I was like, okay, well, that wasn't that helpful for, figuring out
productive.
how to how to do life. So the fact that this was the first guy in a personal relationship with me who would confront me on a fault, love me enough to save me from myself. Like that caused me like to trust him, right? To trust him. And then, so when we got home, we just kind of dated long distance and were married 11 months after we met.
Wow. What a nice story. That's a beautiful story.
Because he was from Texas and I was from Oregon and we were both graduating. So it was just the timing of it was like, well, God's either throwing us together or he's not.
Yeah. So how long have you been married now?
25 years.
25 years. Congratulations.
I didn't grow up going to church until later in my childhood. My family, well, I won't go too much into that because they're still alive, but
well, go into it to an appropriate degree. Something obviously happened in your parents' life that drove this.
Yeah, no. But my family went through a lot of stuff. They got divorced. I struggled with a lot of things, and I would say we started going to church when I was closer to like the 10, 11, 12 range, but then it was still I had such a secular world around me. And so I don't think I really started to take my faith seriously until 17. When I had
who initiated the church going? Your parents to try to reform you, or you because you wanted something, or how did that go? Were you invited
So
by
this is the
someone?
debate. There are 3 different versions of this story, depending on which member of my family you talk to.
I love it.
And I'm happy on a personal level, I'm happy to share that. I don't have any problem sharing it. I'm unusually self-disclosive. I've been told I need to stop sharing vulnerable information. But some of those stories would reveal unfavorable secrets about family members. I won't, but there's definitely, when they're all dead, I'm going to write a book about it. It's definitely what's going to happen. So, yeah.
So let's summarize it, because pastors are used to trying to take dirty little secrets and say them in ways in public places that are passable. So let's say that there was coalescing of certain crises in people's lives, and this
Yes.
led to, well, so a big part of the problem for people who aren't going to church, and then they decide for one reason or another, even in a godless place like Vancouver, British Columbia, that church maybe somehow might at least make things a little bit better. They then have the difficulty of, what church do we go to? Do we go to the one nearest our house? Do we go to one that a friend goes to? Do we go to one that has some connection with family history? So how did your family solve that problem?
Well, my dad was British, so we were going
Oh,
to go to an Anglican church because that's the only, what other church is there?
option number
Um,
three.
yeah, so we went with the Anglican church, and I think they tended to have a bit more of an intellectual. They weren't as anti-intellectual as I think some of like mainstream American evangelicalism can sometimes be. So like it wasn't purity culture. It wasn't, it was an interesting context to have in the background, and I think it was more suited to the secular Vancouver environment. And so it smuggled its way into my life in that way.
High
So,
church? Like what kind of Anglican? Because Anglican doesn't tell you much really these days. So a beautiful building.
oh yeah, beautiful architecture, epic middle of town, this kind of
Okay.
building that was a few hundred years old, or at least 100 years old, I think at this point. So yeah, it was high Anglican, but still, as casual as could be, because we're not in England.
So, okay, so let's talk about you because you can talk about you. So you go to this church as a 10 or 11-year-old. What are your thoughts about this? Is it cool? Is it weird? Is it under duress? How was that
Um,
experience for you?
so I think I was an incredibly uh I like to think deeply about things, so I was always challenging the pastor on, does this
Ah,
make sense? Does the
yeah.
Trinity work? Well, if God created the universe, who created God? Do we actually have free will? That doesn't really seem to make sense. So I was always pushing back on those questions. And yet at the same time, I definitely felt a real sense of, oh, this place is a lot safer.
Mm,
That, it's a refuge in the midst of the insanity of life and the crises of the home. And so there was some safe people there. And in particular, there was one youth pastor who came right as I was probably going to phase out.
mm,
As I was kind of in the, yeah, I don't really, because I have a very anti-establishment type of streak in me,
okay.
and the church is kind of the perfect place to direct that fury.
Yeah.
So I think I was heading in that direction in the 13, 14, 15 range, but
Okay.
then this youth pastor came who's just like the most patient, loving, sweet person in the history of the world.
Mm,
And was just incredibly patient with me in the midst of all those questions. And I really tested his patience. Like,
mm,
he likes to joke that I was the hardest youth kid he ever had, which I don't know if that's
mm.
actually true, but I enjoy hearing him say it is. Like one time I just went up to him in the middle of a service and he was in the back and I just slapped him in the face and walked away. Like I really was trying to push him
Wow.
away or try to find a way to like find a hole in his armor, because I think
Yeah.
he seemed too good to be true.
Yeah.
But he just kept loving me and being patient with me.
Yeah.
And eventually, I had kind of a conversion experience, and that led to me going to Bible college. And that's where I met my wife. And then
Okay, let's not go
yeah,
too far.
so
Let's not get too far ahead of
okay, this
ourselves.
is a
How
slow,
big? I've
slow
got to
build.
see, I'm a pastor and I'm going to focus on this church a little bit. How large a
Yeah,
church was it?
gosh, I think it's maybe 100 people when I was
Okay.
there.
All right.
It's
But they did
it's
have a
it's
youth
shrunk.
pastor, so they had multi-staff.
Yeah, they had a youth pastor. Yeah, I mean, he got paid like nothing, but yeah, they did.
And what
So,
did youth programming look like in this Anglican church?
yeah, so I think originally when he got there was maybe 15, 20 kids in the youth group. They just hanged out once a week at night. We would meet together, do some Bible stories, do a couple games, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
He really whittled that group down to like 4 or 5 people. I don't think it was
Wow.
his fault. I think there was some drama, and half the group took one side and the other half took another side, and so a bunch of them just left over some sort of falling out they had with each other that I don't even
Yeah.
remember what it was about. So it
Yeah.
wasn't his fault, but he whittled that group down to like 3 or 4 people and really invested in them.
Wow.
And so we got all of them, and that was 20 years ago. But
Yeah.
I talked to him yesterday.
How old was he? Was he a young guy or was he an old guy or
He was 28 when he came
okay,
there.
so young guy. So this but he came there to work at the church even though he wasn't paid much of anything.
So he moved to Vancouver to go to Regent College to do his master's.
Ah.
Yeah. And
So
while
the
he
church was
was
able to get him
there,
on the cheap.
I mean, that's how churches do it, right? They take
That is.
advantage of the, it's what you got to do. So, yeah.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. And you're still friends with him today.
Yeah, he's one of the godparents for my children.
Wow.
He did my wedding. I talk to him maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks. So he's just remained consistent
Yeah.
forever.
So you dropped it. Is he pastoring a church now too
Yeah,
or
yeah, he
okay.
still is. Yeah.
Okay. Now you dropped the word conversion. How did your life change in that period as a young teenager?
Yeah, so I was planning to go to UBC, the University of British Columbia. I wasn't quite sure what I was wanting to do. I wanted to be a writer, but that seemed like a reach, so I
Mm,
was thinking about maybe law, some different areas like that. But then when when I kind of had a more intense faith transition, I was like, well, this is it. Like, I'm not half in, I'm all in. I'm going to go to Bible college and become a pastor. And I very flippantly, haphazardly, without much thought, said, well, where did you go to school? And I'll go where you went. And he
yeah.
said, you don't want to go where I went. Like, I went in the Bible Belt to Ozark Christian College in Joplin, Missouri. And I was like, no, I'll go there. Um, and so I did. I went from probably the most secular place in North America to the Bible Belt to a borderline fundamentalist Bible college. Um, and
Wow.
yeah, so.
And what was that transition like?
It was crazy. I just showed up. I'd never been there. I was 17. A lot of people were just because I was coming from Vancouver. I was very liberal. I was very secular, and I was still a new Christian. So like I just showed up, and I think everyone just was like, "Who the hell is this guy?" I regularly got told I was going to hell, because my views were way more progressive and I just didn't have that Christian cultural background. Like I didn't grow up listening to Hillsong or, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so I was constantly just shocking everyone. And I was just like, I'm just being me, people. I'm not trying to, but I think the first year I just reveled in being
Mm,
a maverick and pissing everybody off. But then
yeah.
I started to get some real friendships.
Yeah.
And I think if I expected them to accept me, I also had to do some work to meet them where they were. And
Yeah.
so I think I grew a bit and matured. And as much as I didn't agree with them on a lot of stuff and still don't, I was able to appreciate some of the stuff that they were doing there. They loved the Bible at a
Yeah.
level that I've never seen anywhere else. Like
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
some of like one of my classes, we just memorized First Timothy. That was
Yeah.
the class.
Yeah.
And we did it's it was a 5-year program with 160 credits, and like 140 of them were just Bible books,
Yeah.
right? Like,
When they said
um,
Bible college, they meant it.
they meant it, and um, and so like even though I don't even necessarily agree on their views of the Bible, I love the Bible so deeply in a way that I haven't seen at other institutions I've gone to. And
Mm,
they really meant discipleship. Like we were talking about deep stuff. We were unpacking our childhoods and our past and like it was a place where a lot of spiritual growth happened.
mm,
And I look back on it with pros and cons, but a lot of love at the same time.
yeah.
Um,
Now you
so
mentioned you mentioned you met your wife there.
yeah.
Where was she? Was she there normally, unlike you, or is she another refugee from a secular outpost?
No, she grew up in Joplin, Missouri.
Oh,
And so she just went, it's the
yeah,
local Bible college, and she was just, small town Christian conservative girl. And I showed up and we just fought about everything. We argued for hours about like abortion and homosexuality and just basically any possible subject where there might be that tension
yeah,
between those two cultures.
yeah.
So we argued a lot, and I really did not like her, and I don't think she liked me either. And um,
Perfect rom-com.
yeah, but then I think I started to soften a bit and to learn how to love this culture and people, even
Yeah,
though I was very different from them. And I
yeah.
started to grow a bit more spiritually. And I don't think she needed to grow. She was already mature. I just, but then we started doing ministry together.
Uh,
In our third year, they had a student outreach program that they had asked for some of the people at the Bible college to go and help lead it. So we started driving 45 minutes each way once a week together to go do this ministry thing. And
mhm.
we, started talking and spent a lot of time together.
Yeah,
And so I asked
yeah.
her out and she said no. But um so she rejected me. But
Which you can
then,
continue to throw in her face now that you're married. When
oh
I
yeah,
asked, you said no.
she's not embarrassed about it at all. She loves that, but to be fair, I was not well seen on campus. I
Oh.
uh I was often mistaken for a homeless man because I lacked I like I this was my first time living on my own. I moved there at 17. I didn't have any, I just sort of went there, and like when my shoes broke, I would just tape them back together again. And I used to have this giant grocery bag that I would carry everywhere with my books, and I would have a giant milk carton that I cleaned out and used for water. And so I would
Ah,
just drink from the milk carton. Um,
she was
so
right to turn you down. You were feral.
yeah, and also like um I just hadn't really grown like I hadn't grown up a lot at
Yeah,
that stage. I didn't have a driver's license because I'm from a downtown city.
yeah,
And so like we walked everywhere. And like Americans get their driver's license at 16. I have friends who still don't have their driver's license, but I didn't have a driver's license yet. That kind of stuff.
yeah.
And so uh I was but then the last year, my senior year, is when I was a lot of the maturity that I think had been building started to finally bubble to the surface,
Ah.
and I
The
started doing a lot
frog is
more.
becoming a prince.
I know she hadn't kissed me yet, though. That's it would have happened a lot quicker. No, it wouldn't have happened if she kissed me earlier. But that fourth year is when my senior year is when I think I started to show that I wasn't just going to be a disappointment. And I became really good friends with her brother, and he'll deny it, but I was totally his mentor for a while. And so then her whole family's trying to get her to go on a date with me, including her brother. And so finally, at the end of that year, um, I moved back to Canada. And
Oh.
I think it was sort of you don't know what you got till it's gone kind of thing.
Absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Yeah, so she called me up and was like, "So, you know, yeah, I like you now." And so,
Well, let me ask you a question. Your wife is from Joplin, Missouri. What do her parents think of the fact that you take this girl from the warm, cozy, safe, Christian, heaven-bound Bible Belt to godless Vancouver and then to England
yeah.
for a while? Are you on okay terms with your in-laws?
So I think they were very relieved that they were able to marry her off. Because so the thing about my wife was she was there's two things that are simultaneously true. At our undergrad, a number of people referred to her as the best catch on campus. But she never went out with anyone. She didn't have any boyfriends. I was her first boyfriend because she just was so focused on doing what she was doing and working and school and her ministry, and she wanted to go be a missionary. And she had her plan, and
Yeah.
I think at the time we thought she's too good for boys. I now know she's actually quite socially awkward. I figured her out. Um,
Oh,
but
God.
so she was
Now I'm
simultaneously
gonna
the
have to
best.
have her on the channel and talk to her for a rando just to get the rebuttal.
Well, you could, because she's also done ministry and she's doing theology stuff, so she's into it. But yeah, uh so she became known as the nun of Ozark, the nun of Ozark Christian College, because she wasn't going out with anyone.
Wow.
So I think her parents were just like, "Oh, thank God, we're not going to have a spinster that we have to take care of into old age." It was a very gendered type of thing. And they were annoyed about the Canada thing. But they brought it up one time, and I said to her dad, "You know that if she didn't go to Canada with me, she was going to go to like Africa alone, right? Like this is the better of the two options for you." Um, so I think they were okay with that. I think I have a really good relationship with her family. I think if they'd met me my first year when I went to Ozark, they would have hated me. But they didn't meet me until 4 or 5 years after that. And by
Okay.
that time, I had figured out how to not offend all of the Bible Belt people. And so I think we actually have a really good relationship. I think Trump has complicated that, and I don't think
Yes,
I'm
yes,
disclosing anything. They probably say the same thing.
yes, yes.
But otherwise, I think, I love them. They're I think they love me.
All right. So
Still I have it. There are moments I conveniently forget that I'm a 40-year-old man. The last vestiges of a ghost long dead. A ghost with a messiah complex. A messiah too lazy to rise or ascend. Happily hurt and hard. A hanger-on or haunting of a time past. A heroic dream of the harrowing of hell. Failure to launch. Cling to a life vest. Treading in spells that linger and last. Mom and Dad, righteous and mad, daydreamers with ghosts of their own. My memory of them stoic, looking with aims to pretend. Always on the brink of somewhere. Each a child dancing on the fence. On down the river. Dreamt in the sunshine. Saturday morning cartoons, the only Sabbath I knew. A disciple of Jim Henson and John Hughes. Worship in cathedrals where the Toys R Us. Baptized in ball pits. A clown served the sacrament we eat. More Pepsi and Pizza Hut. Say please. Say cheese. Between Kurt Cobain, a scrambled cable screen, towers tumbling, Super Bowls, and reality TV, the ghost is constitutionally unwilling and intrinsically unable to see and be seen, searching madly for attention to seek. But you could be anything. Never say never. If you've got nothing nice to say, don't say nothing, ever. Don't talk to strangers, see what I say, just do it. You don't listen very well, do you? You don't do very well, do you? You're not looking too good, are you? Keep up. Appearances aren't what they seem. Will you ever grow up? You look like you're stuck. I think you took too much. Echoes the ghost within the host, who prays the dead bury their dead and stay buried in a fading dream.
I don't know about the meaning crisis, left, right, black, white, or other vices, which Jesus Christ is right, or if we're all saved. From my perspective, our propositions participate procedurally, running in circles. Remember in body, we're in the age of decay. Symbolically speaking, the reapers are reaping, them damn egregores are whispering sweetly. We're all NPCs in the belly of the beast. Red pill, blue pill, bread pill, Mars Hill, or DMT, or whatever you feel. Got one and number two, it's all the same damn thing. So clean your room, repent on Zoom, ontology for dummies, a bird's eye view. 'Cause if you really knew, could you really even say? Totally depraved, all totally saved, a total disposition from the bed we all made. Or is it the elect, or are we just insane? From John Vervaeke to Jonathan Pajot and Jordan Peterson to the Chris Pacou Show, Paul Vanderklays and Griswold Grimm and all the dice he shakes. This estuary ditty is a little bit cringy, ain't quite the U-shaped or the hero's journey. All the NPCs in the flood treading water to watch you save the day with a bunch of chitter-chatter. From the ortho bros to the Catholic Joes, or atheistic Jobs, to Protestant folks, the Joe Schmoes, and Jewish Jacobs, and everything in between. So love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul, with all your mind and your fingers and toes, all your neighbors too, as if they were your own. So love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul, and with all your mind and your fingers and toes, all your neighbors too, as if they were your own.